Hey, hey. So the previous video was beliefs as a sacrifice. And I would definitely recommend it. Or at least I would definitely recommend the concept of giving something of importance for something of equal value. And I think I explained well how basically our belief systems are, you don't really change a belief system. You don't add a different system to a system that's already there. You have to change it, or you have to just like approach it differently. But this video is about acceptance, man, or at least it looks like it. Acceptance in terms of allowing something to try to get close, but you explaining where and why your limits are. So here's the thing about acceptance for me. I completely did not accept it. So acceptance for me had a meaning. I completely forgot what it was. And throughout the last year, 2 years, man, I have continuously addressed how I accept things. And this seems to be a turning point. Acceptance in terms of allowing something to try to get close to you, to get close, but you explaining where and why your limits are. So the idea behind it is just because I accept something doesn't mean I would want it to be a part of my life. I accept that it exists. Why the fuck not? But its acceptance does not necessarily have to be a personal thing. And that's mainly that's most of the conversations I have with people when they're talking about accepting people for who they are. And I completely agree. That's exactly something that everyone should do. Like, I accept you for who you are. But it doesn't fucking mean I want to be involved. Just because I accept you for who you are doesn't mean like I care for who you are or the way you are. And here it's because like once we accept something, we get to see it from a different angle, from different angles, instead of just like the whole like rejecting its existence or rejecting the possibility of its presence around us. So ultimately, the idea of accepting is more like, no, okay, this is happening, I accept it, and then you kind of like come close to as much as you're comfortable with it. And it depends on whatever the thing is. Be somebody being an asshole, it could be a situation that you have to kind of like you either handle it, deal with it, or just tell it to fuck off. It could be a business thing, or it can just be like the world. There are a lot of things that you can just kind of like look at and be like, I don't accept this. And it seems heavier when you detach yourself from it because that's a claim on sovereignty. Sovereignty, I think, is one of my core values. It's funny because, like, to be sovereign over your own self is probably one of the most interesting things anyone could move towards. And it's also one of the most misunderstood concepts because like you're always thinking that you're in control or you're in charge, but the reality is you're always basically like triggered, swayed. All of these show that you're not really in charge. And so sovereignty for me is one of the key, is one of my top core values. And so when you accept something, you just kind of like do it in order for you to, let's just say, come at it from an objective standpoint. Because if you don't accept it, it's basically an emotional response, right? Yes, not accepting something is definitely an emotional response because that's because we're judging whether it's right or wrong, whether we like it or we don't like it, whether it needs to exist or shouldn't exist. All these stuff are basically like coming from something emotional with us. Values, man, don't necessarily have to be emotional. Maybe they're protected emotionally or expressed emotionally, but they don't really have to be like emotional. So it gives you an objective approach once you actually look at something with acceptance. And it allows you to kind of like get close enough for you to be like, okay, this is enough. And I think the Stoics wrote something about it. And I think it goes something along the line of uh, you don't have to dig deep into everything in front of you. Like, why do I want to, like, the people that love chemistry will probably like dive into rocks like crazy or like into other stuff like crazy. But like a person who just wants to drive the car wouldn't care about fuel and how where it comes from or how it actually operates in the engine. All they want is fuel for the car. So that gives us a certain kind of like, it's there, I can do this with it, that's enough. And you get to objectively like decide what are the things that you want to get close to instead of emotionally. And again, I'm stressing on the emotional part because I think that's basically how we refute something. And explaining basically here when I say, but you explaining where and why your limits are, you're not explaining it to anyone, you're explaining it to yourself. When you're looking at something objectively, then you're basically like reflecting on it from a point of view that's distant enough for you to not actually like get involved with it at the very least. And then you get to choose if you want to get involved or not. I've said it many times, but that's you explaining, okay, this is my limit. As in, I'm okay with this, not this. And just recently, like 3 years ago, I had somebody that I called a friend, and he turned out to be one of like, I don't know, snaky people, right? Like a lot of your friends sometimes have like light jabs, and some friends kind of like misguide you on purpose. They, it's funny, like the metaphor about it is like crabs. Like if you get crabs in the ocean and you put them in a bucket, any crab that's almost on its way out gets pulled back by other crabs. And that is basically like what society kind of like feels like to me. And I've had a lot of people that kind of like did that, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But explaining where your limits are allows you to be like, okay, so like this guy is exhibiting these things, or this person is or woman is exhibiting these things, or she has this lifestyle, and it is very valid for you to kind of be like, no, I don't want to be a part of something like this, regardless. Maybe they're great people, but like, you give yourself the space needed in order to understand them properly. You give yourself a situation, for example, is looking a certain kind of way. You allow yourself to give yourself the space instead of kind of like jumping into it or completely running away from it, right? Because it happens both ways. I can either say no, I don't want to fucking do anything about it, or yes, I want to be involved. But the objectivity of acceptance is literally what we're aiming for right now. It's like, what are your limits? If you get involved, how would that affect you? Do we understand these things about us, especially when every situation comes out differently? And that part, I think acceptance kind of like allows us to document within ourselves the actual points of connection that reveal to us, okay, so like this is the situation, and if I get this close to it, then this is going to happen to me. Can I handle it or not? Do I want to handle it or not? Suddenly you're reflecting on different things regarding the situation that you never saw before, because when you're only thinking emotionally, you're only seeing something from your own perspective. It's not from your own perspective. You're taking it personally. So you're involving yourself in it without actually seeing it. When you give it the chance to be accepted by you, what you're doing is you're seeing yourself in the situation, not the other way around. Yes, yes, acceptance allows you to see yourself in the situation. You see the situation and assess yourself in the situation, whether it's your limits, whether it's like why you have these limits. Because, like, why do you have these limits? Because of past experience, because they're against your values, because they kind of like express something that you don't want to be a part of, whether it's just baby laziness. I'm not into this, whatever, man. This something doesn't interest me. Otherwise, something deeper, like, foundationally, this is something I don't like happening or I don't like to be a part of. It's going to happen regardless of who I am. And the beauty behind it is really just the fact that once you accept something, you're no longer looking at it. You're no longer personalizing it. You're looking at yourself from a personal perspective. and seeing the distance between you and it, and seeing how things kind of like just creating an environment or multiple environments that correlate to that specific situation, and giving yourself that assessment, which also accumulates to experience. Because ultimately, if I'm gonna talk to somebody and I'm gonna poke them, that's gonna result in something. If I'm gonna just put my hand on their shoulder is gonna result in something. If I'm gonna pick a fight with them, it's gonna result in something. If I'm gonna hit on them, it's gonna result in something. And acceptance kind of allows you to go through all these kind of like small things. It's like different scenarios about the same situation, which enhance the actual experience gained from that situation itself, period. And that's I think the beauty of objectively like exploring things. Fuck, I feel vulnerable. But I love you guys. And it's a video.